In this segment, I'm going to show you how to set up a telescope. Two things to keep in mind. One, there are two basic types of telescopes. One is called an altitude azimuth telescope, or an alt-az. The other is called an equatorial or a German equatorial telescope. They are different, and they each have advantages and disadvantages. I'm going to show you how to set up both in two separate videos. But one important thing to keep in mind. People often, when they buy a telescope, they don't take it out for the first time. They take it out for the first time in the dark, in the middle of nowhere. And what happens is they can't set it up, they get confused, they get frustrated, and then the thing sits in the closet and it's just a waste of money. So regardless of whatever type of telescope you get, the most important thing is, one, set it up for the first time during the day. Do practice setups. You won't be able to observe anything, but you won't waste your time when you take it out at night. The other is, of course, to practice with it. You almost need to think of it more like a musical instrument. Doing it is what helps you get better at it. Set it up, assemble it and take it apart a few times during the day so that when you go out with it at night, you'll spend your time observing and not spend your time flipping through manuals or getting frustrated trying to see with a flashlight and not knowing what you're doing. Okay, two types of telescopes. An alt-az or altitude azimuth telescope and a German equatorial one. For people that are buying their first telescope, I recommend getting an alt-az. It's a little less capable than the equatorial, but it's much simpler to set up and much simpler to use. Okay, now, all telescopes have three basic components to them. They have a tripod, all right, that's what everything sits on. They have what's called the mount. The mount goes on top of the tripod, and it does two things. If you have any electronics or gearing, they're inside the mount. And of course, the mount holds the optical tube, which is the third part. And the optical tube is what most people think of as the telescope. Okay? Now, the main thing with the tripod is that you should get it leveled. All right? With an alt-az mount, it's not absolutely critical, but it's easy to do, and it helps with things. All right, it'll help you with finding objects and all of that sort of thing. Most will have a level built into it, as this one does. If they don't, if you have a level in your garage, just bring it with you. Many cell phones also, you can get leveling apps that'll help you with it, and they're close enough. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but on this one, it's slightly out of level. Okay? All right. Now, to level that, all I have to do is lower one of the tripod legs, which I'll do. Okay? Bit of a guess game here. All right. But you lower it. Okay. You look at it again, it's still a little bit off. Okay. Whoops, that was a little too far. Okay. It's a bit of a game, but we'll get it. A little bit more. Okay, now if you can see, it's not perfectly level, but that is close enough for rock and roll. All right? Okay, now, another thing you want to do is make sure that the tripod legs are tight. You don't want the legs, kind of slipping while you're trying to observe. All right, so there's your tripod, and your tripod is level. Next thing you're going to do is attach the mount. Now, different brands of telescopes, different types, it'll all be a little different, but the basics are the same. So for this one, by the way, this is the same as the beautiful telescope that the library has, which we bring to some of the star parties. This is the mount, okay? This connects to the tripod and it holds the optical tube. So the main thing you want to do here is connect it. And in most cases, that's pretty simple. Okay, there you go. Now again, you want to make sure that it's securely attached. You don't have to over-tighten it, okay? But you securely attach it. Because again, you don't want it to come loose or to fall off or anything like that. Okay, all right, so now you've got a level tripod. You've got the mount attached to it. You might say, what's this thing down here? Okay, this is what they call a leg spreader, all right, or an accessory tray. What it does, believe it or not, is hold your accessories like eyepieces, okay? And it also helps stabilize the telescope. Stability is critical. You're looking at things literally trillions of miles away. So the slightest little bit of shake gives you a problem, okay? So again, you want to just make sure that this is secure, okay, which can take a minute. And again, different telescopes will have slightly different designs. There you go. You want to, it also makes sure that the legs are fully spread. As you just saw here, these were not fully spread. And what you don't want is after you've aligned your telescope to have the legs slip and you have to realign it. Okay? Again, you want to tighten it, but you don't need to over-tighten it. Okay? All right, now you're mostly there. Okay? You've got your tripod is level, your mount is attached, okay? Now the main thing you want to do, the most important thing is to attach the optical tube, okay? The optical tube is what most people think of as the telescope, although really it's the whole thing. Now, with optical tubes, thing number one is handle them with care. Even on an inexpensive telescope, it's precision optics in a precision alignment, okay? And if you knock them about, you can knock it out of alignment. You can't fix it, but it's a pain, okay? Usually, attaching the optical tube is pretty simple. But the thing is, you want to make sure that it's firmly attached. What you don't want is to have the optical tube fall off and it can be destroyed, okay? So you do it carefully to make sure that you've got room there for it. Okay, you attach it, make sure it's in there. This is one you want to make sure it's good and tight. Okay. And once you get used to this, some people leave it set up. If you have a garage and you just observe in your backyard, this is not all that heavy. It's about 40 pounds, which is not nothing, but you can carry it, okay? All right, that's your basic setup. But the critical thing is setting up what's called the finder scope. People get so frustrated. They buy telescopes and they don't know how to set them up, or they set them up incorrectly. They try to use it and they can't find anything. And then, of course, it doesn't matter whether they've spent $50 or $500. You've wasted it if it's just sitting in the closet. The critical thing is the finder scope. Okay, now there's different types of finder scopes. Let me show you what I have. All right, it's easy to do, but if you don't do it, you're wasting your time. And again, this is something that the initial setup should be done during the day. So you're not wasting time trying to do this at night. As soon as I find it here. Has to be the last thing. All right. This is a typical finder scope. There are different types. This is what they call a non-magnifying. So whatever you see through here is what you're going to see in the sky, but it has a little red dot at the center. That's very important. Attach it firmly, okay? Now also, at that point, what you want to do, virtually all telescopes will come with what's called a diagonal. You don't have to have a diagonal, but what it does is it makes it much easier to look through it. Otherwise, you're getting down on your knees or whatever. So attach the diagonal. Okay, put in an eyepiece. We'll get into eyepieces, but okay. Now you've got your basic setup, but you have to have, the finder scope is critical. All right, what you have to do is align the finder scope with the main telescope. Okay, once you do that, you can find just about anything, but if you don't, you'll never find anything. All right, the basic process, I can't really do it here in the studio, but I can sort of show you. Get something recognizable centered in the main scope. All right, it should be minimally a few hundred feet away, and it should be something recognizable. If you can, and this is hard to do, if you can, focus in on something like a quarter mile away. Ashland's pretty hilly. It's hillier than people think, so that's hard to do, okay? And something recognizable, like a tree limb is not good, okay, because tree limbs pretty much look the same. Something like a license plate or a street sign, okay? The first thing you would do would be to get it centered in the eyepiece, all right? I can't do it here, okay? But let's say you've got a license plate a quarter mile away, okay? So something you can recognize. First thing, get it centered in the main telescope, all right? Get it centered in the eyepiece here, okay? The next thing then is get it centered in the finder scope. The finder scopes will have little adjustments on the side, all right? Your finder scope should have something like a red dot or a diagonal, okay, or a cross in the center of it. You're lining the two things up so that when something is in the center of the finder scope, it's also in the center of the telescope. So you find something at least a few hundred feet away, and preferably like a quarter mile, something, a street sign, all right, a boulder you recognize, license plates are good. Center it in the main telescope first. Then you use the finder scope adjustments to center it in the finder scope. Once you've got them matched, the sky is literally the limit, because then all you do, particularly if you have a manual telescope, all right, most telescopes these days are computerized, and that requires some further setup. We'll do a separate lesson on that. But with a manual telescope, if you don't have the finder scope aligned, you'll never find anything. But once you've got it aligned, then all you do is you get something centered in the finder scope, and it'll be in the main telescope. And that's obviously easy with things that you can see with the naked eye. So the moon, Venus, the bright stars. Get it centered in the finder scope, and it'll be in the telescope. And that is pretty much it. That is a basic setup for a manual alt-azimuth telescope. The critical thing is get the finder scope aligned with the main scope and practice during the day. Don't take it out for the first time at night. You'll just waste your time. Set it up during the day, get it aligned during the day. And do it a few times so that when you go out at night, you won't do anything other than enjoy your telescope. Next up, German equatorial mounts. See you then.